You are listening to HOA Rejected. This is how a warning turned into a threat. My name is Ethan. I work in IT compliance auditing, which means I spend my days reading policies, tracking logs, and documenting everything. I moved to Park City, Utah 2 years ago because the tech firm I consult for opened a regional office and they needed someone who could handle remote infrastructure reviews. The mountains were supposed to be a bonus. The skiing was supposed to make up for the cost of living. What I did not expect was the Whispering Pines Landing Association, an HOA that treats every property like a crime scene and every homeowner like a suspect. The woman screaming at me right now is Shirley Johnson, though everyone calls her Linda with no notice because she never gives you one. She is the neighborhood watch liaison, which in this HOA means she patrols the streets with a clipboard, a small handheld stamp she slams onto paper, and a laminated fence guideline sheet she waves around without letting anyone read it. She has red hair pulled into a bun, a white blazer over a purple shirt, and a pink sun hat that makes her look like she is heading to a garden party. She is not. She is here to destroy me over 6 inches of fence height and a property line she measured wrong. Linda is standing in my driveway right now, one hand pointing at the fence I just installed, the other hand holding a certified letter envelope with dirt-smudged corners. Her voice is loud enough that a teen on a bike just braked hard at the corner to watch the argument. She is yelling, "You do not get to ignore the rules just because you think you are special. That fence is over the height limit, it is too close to the easement, and you did not submit for approval. You are getting fined, you are getting a stop work order, and if you touch one more board, I will have the association file a lien so fast your head will spin." I am holding my phone out between us, the screen showing a time-stamped clip of her threatening me 2 days ago. I have not said anything yet. I am just standing here in my red hoodie and green trucker cap, a folded contractor invoice packet in my hoodie sleeve, letting her talk herself into a corner. The fence behind me is a standard 6-foot cedar panel fence, posts set in concrete, gate hung level, everything by the book. I had it surveyed, I had it measured, I had the contractor pull permits with the county. The problem is not the fence. The problem is Linda targeted the wrong segment, realized it halfway through her enforcement wave, and decided to backfill evidence rather than admit the mistake. The rules do not care about your excuses, and neither do I, she snaps, her voice cracking on the last word. That is her catchphrase. She has said it to me 3 times now, always with the same self-righteous tone, always while holding that laminated sheet like it is a legal document. I finally speak. "Linda, the fence is compliant. I have the survey, I have the permit, and I have photos of 4 other fences in this neighborhood that are taller and closer to the property line than mine. You have not found any of them. So either you are enforcing selectively, or you made a mistake and you are trying to cover it up." Her face goes red. She steps closer, close enough that I can see the smudge of dirt on the envelope she is holding. "You should have read the rules before you moved in, sweetheart," she says, her voice dripping with condescension. That line lands like a slap. It is not the first time she has called me sweetheart. It is not the first time she has implied I am too stupid to read. But it is the last time she is going to get away with it, because I have been recording every interaction, logging every notice, and building a case that is going to bury her. The fence dispute started 3 weeks ago when I hired a contractor to replace the rotting rail fence that came with the house. The old fence was a disaster, posts leaning, boards split, gate dragging on the ground. I got quotes, picked a local guy named Mike who had good reviews, and filed the permit application with Summit County. The HOA covenant says you need board approval for exterior changes, so I submitted the fence plan to the management company with photos, measurements, and a timeline. I waited 2 weeks. No response. I called. No callback. I emailed. Nothing. Mike said if we did not start soon, his schedule would fill up and I would be waiting until spring. So I made the call. We started the work. The first day, Mike and his crew pulled the old fence, dug new post holes, and set the corners. I was at my desk inside, on a video call with a client in Denver, when I heard a car door slam. I looked out the window and saw Linda marching across my lawn with a clipboard and a tape measure. She did not knock. She did not call. She just walked up to the fence line, stretched the tape measure between 2 stakes, and started writing. When Mike asked her what she was doing, she told him the work was unpermitted and he needed to stop immediately, or she would report him to the county. Mike, to his credit, pulled out his phone and showed her the permit number. She did not even look. She just said, "That does not matter, the HOA has not approved this," and walked away. That night, I got the first notice. It was not mailed. It was not emailed. It was taped to my front door with packing tape, the corners already curling from the cold. The notice said I was in violation of Section 12.4 of the Whispering Pines Landing Covenants for constructing an unapproved fence, and I had 72 hours to remove it or face a $500 fine plus $50 per day until compliance. No hearing. No appeal process. Just a demand and a threat. I read it twice, pulled up the covenant PDF on my laptop, and confirmed what I already knew. Section 12.4 requires board approval, but it also says the board has 30 days to respond, and silence is considered approval if they miss the deadline. I submitted my application 5 weeks ago. They were late. I was in the clear. I called the management company the next morning. The receptionist transferred me to a woman named Brenda, who handles compliance. I explained the situation, gave her the timeline, and asked why Linda was issuing notices when the board had missed their own deadline. Brenda put me on hold for 6 minutes. When she came back, her tone had shifted. She said the board had the right to enforce covenants regardless of administrative timelines, and if I had a problem with the notice, I could request a hearing. I asked when the hearing would be. She said the next board meeting was in 4 weeks. I asked what happens to the fine in the meantime. She said it accrues. That same afternoon, a neighbor 2 doors down, a guy named Greg who works from home and has lived here for 8 years, came by with a 6-pack of beer and a warning. He stood on my porch and told me Linda had done this before. 3 years ago, she went after a couple who painted their shutters without approval. She hit them with fines, threatened a lien, and made their lives miserable until they repainted the shutters the original color and paid a settlement to make the case go away. Greg said the board backs her because she does the dirty work they do not want to do. She finds violations, she writes notices, she escalates until people either comply or move. The board uses vendors as muscle and pretends it is policy. If you fight her, Greg said, she will make it worse. If you fold, she will move on to the next target. Either way, she wins. I thanked Greg for the warning, but I did not take the advice. I have spent my entire career auditing compliance systems, finding gaps and holding people accountable when they skip steps. Linda skipped steps. The board skipped steps. I had documentation. I had logs. I had a paper trail that proved they were wrong. I was not folding. The next day, I got a second notice. This one was different. It was not about board approval. It was about fence height. Linda claimed my fence exceeded the maximum height of 6 feet, as measured from grade, and I needed to either lower the fence or submit an engineering report proving the elevation was compliant. The notice included a grainy photo of my fence taken from the street, with a red circle drawn around one post and a handwritten note that said exceeds limit by 8 inches. I walked outside with my own tape measure and checked. The fence was exactly 6 feet from the ground on my side. On the street side, where the grade sloped down slightly, the fence measured 6 feet 8 inches. I pulled the covenant language again. It said height is measured from the interior grade, not the street. My fence was compliant. Linda was measuring from the wrong side. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA drama. I printed the covenant section, highlighted the relevant sentence, and walked over to Linda's house. She lives 4 streets over in a corner lot with a pristine lawn, decorative rocks, and a flagpole. I knocked. She opened the door holding a coffee mug and that same laminated sheet. Before I could say anything, she said, "I am not discussing HOA business on my personal time. If you have a concern, submit it in writing to the management company." Then she closed the door. I submitted it in writing. I attached the covenant language, my survey, my photos, and a comparison set showing 3 other fences in the neighborhood that were taller than mine when measured from the street. I sent it to Brenda at the management company and copied the entire board. I got an auto reply from Brenda. I got nothing from the board. 2 days later, I got a third notice. This one said my fence was too close to the utility easement and I needed to move it back 18 inches or face an immediate stop work order and a $1,000 fine. The notice was signed by Linda and stamped with her little handheld stamp. No engineering review, no survey reference, just her word against mine. That is when I called my friend Rachel. Rachel is a property manager in Salt Lake who has dealt with HOAs for 15 years. She knows the games they play, the loopholes they exploit, and the pressure points that make them back down. I sent her the notices, the covenant, and my documentation. She called me back an hour later and said, "They are trying to bury you in process. They know you are right, but they are betting you will give up before it gets to a real hearing. Your best move is to file a records request. Ask for every fence approval in the last 5 years, every variance granted, and every fine issued. If they are enforcing selectively, the records will prove it. If they are making it up, they will stall, and you will have grounds for a complaint." I filed the records request the next morning. I asked for fence approvals, variance logs, and enforcement actions from the last 5 years. I also asked for the minutes from every board meeting where fence disputes were discussed. The law in Utah says HOAs have 10 business days to respond to records requests. I put the deadline in the subject line. I sent it certified mail. I sent it by email. I documented everything. While I waited, Mike finished the fence. The posts were set. The panels were hung. The gate was aligned. It looked good. It was solid. It was compliant. I paid Mike the final invoice, and he left. That night, someone moved one of my survey stakes. I had marked the property line with wooden stakes and orange string before we started digging. The next morning, one of the corner stakes was pulled out and moved 6 inches toward my house. The string was snapped. The dirt around the hole was disturbed. I checked my doorbell camera. At 2 in the morning, a figure in a hoodie walked up my driveway, crouched by the stake, pulled it out, and moved it. The camera did not catch the face, but it caught the pink sun hat sitting on the ground next to the figure while she worked. I saved the footage. I did not confront Linda. I did not call the police yet. I wanted her to think she got away with it. I wanted her to get comfortable. That is the thing about people like Linda. They get sloppy when they think they are winning. I reset the stake in the correct position, replaced the string, and added a motion-activated camera pointed at the property line. If she came back, I would have better footage. 2 days later, a utility company truck showed up. A guy in a yellow vest got out, walked to my fence line, and started spray painting orange marks on the ground. I went outside and asked what he was doing. He said he was marking the utility easement for a service upgrade. I asked who requested it. He checked his clipboard and said the HOA. I asked if there was actually a service upgrade planned. He shrugged and said he was just following the work order. I took a photo of his truck, his clipboard, and the marks. Then I called the utility company. The customer service rep said there was no service upgrade on file for my address. The work order had been submitted by someone claiming to represent the HOA, but it was not verified. She said she would cancel it and send someone to remove the marks. I asked for a copy of the work order. She said she would email it. The work order arrived that afternoon. It was submitted by Linda. She used her title as Neighborhood Watch Liaison and claimed there was a code compliance issue that required immediate utility access. She lied. She fabricated a work order to create a paper trail that made it look like my fence was blocking easement access. I forwarded the email to Rachel. Rachel said, "That is fraud. You need to document this and file a police report if she does it again. But more importantly, you need to take this to the board before she does something worse." The records request response came back the next day. Brenda sent a PDF with 43 pages of board meeting minutes, 12 fence approval forms, and 0 enforcement logs. The minutes showed that in the last 5 years, the board had approved 9 fence projects. 8 of them were approved in under 2 weeks. 1 took 6 weeks because the homeowner requested a variance for height. None of them were fined. None of them were issued stop work orders. The only enforcement action mentioned in the minutes was mine. Rachel was right. They were making it up as they went. I compiled everything into a single file: the covenant language, the survey, the photos of other fences, the records request response, the utility work order, and the doorbell footage of Linda moving my stake. I wrote a cover letter explaining the timeline, the selective enforcement, and the fabricated work order. I sent it to the board, the management company, and my attorney. Yes, I hired an attorney. His name is David, and he specializes in HOA disputes. He charged me $200 to review my case and write a letter to the board. The letter said I was prepared to file a complaint with the Utah Department of Commerce if the fines were not rescinded and the notices were not withdrawn. It also said if Linda continued to harass me, I would pursue a restraining order and a civil suit for defamation and interference. David sent the letter on a Friday. On Monday, I got a call from Brenda. She said the board wanted to meet with me informally to discuss the fence issue and see if we could resolve it without a hearing. I said I would meet with them if Linda was not present and if the meeting was recorded. Brenda said she would check. She called back an hour later and said the board agreed. The meeting was set for Wednesday at 6 in the evening at the clubhouse. I showed up 15 minutes early with my file, my phone, and a voice recorder. The clubhouse is a small building near the neighborhood entrance with a kitchenette, a conference table, and a wall of framed photos showing the neighborhood in various stages of development. 3 board members were there: the president, a retired engineer named Tom, the treasurer, a woman named Karen, who is not the same Karen as Linda, but close enough to be confusing, and the secretary, a guy named Paul, who works in real estate. Brenda was there too, sitting at the end of the table with a laptop. Tom started the meeting by saying they appreciated me coming in, and they wanted to find a reasonable solution. I said I appreciated the opportunity, but I needed to understand why I was being fined for a compliant fence, when the record showed no other homeowner had been treated the same way. Tom said Linda had raised concerns about the fence height and setback, and the board had a duty to investigate. I said the concerns were based on incorrect measurements and fabricated evidence, and I had documentation proving it. I pulled out the survey, the photos, the covenant language, and the doorbell footage. I played the footage on my phone. The room went quiet. Paul, the secretary, leaned forward and said, "Is that Linda?" I said yes. He said, "She moved your survey stake?" I said yes, and I have the timestamp, and I have the pink sun hat and frame, and I have the motion-activated follow-up camera that caught her coming back the next night to check if I reset it. Tom looked at Brenda. Brenda looked at her laptop. Karen, the treasurer, said, "This is a problem." Tom asked if I had filed a police report. I said not yet, because I wanted to give the board a chance to handle it internally first. But if the fines were not rescinded, and Linda was not removed from enforcement duties, I would file the report, I would file the complaint with the state, and I would pursue the civil case. Tom said he understood. He said the board would review the evidence and get back to me within 48 hours. I said that was fine, but the clock was ticking. I had a buyer interested in the house, and I needed the HOA to sign off on the disclosure paperwork without any open violations. If the fines were not cleared, the sale would fall through, and I would lose the contract. That last part was the stakes. I was trying to sell the house, not because of Linda, though she was not helping. I got a job offer in Denver with a 30% raise and better benefits, and I needed to move by the end of the quarter. The buyer was a couple from California who loved the location but were nervous about the HOA. They asked for copies of the covenants, the financial statements, and any open violation notices. I had to disclose the fence dispute. Their agent said if the dispute was not resolved before closing, they would walk. I had 4 weeks to fix it. The board called me Thursday morning. Tom said they had reviewed the evidence, discussed it with their attorney, and decided to rescind the fines and withdraw the notices. He said Linda would no longer be involved in fence enforcement, and the board would implement a new checklist to prevent similar issues in the future. He apologized for the confusion and said they hoped we could move forward without further conflict. I said I appreciated the resolution, but I needed it in writing, and I needed the disclosure paperwork updated to reflect that there were no open violations. Tom said Brenda would handle it, and I would have the documents by the end of the day. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. That afternoon, I got a call from Mike, the contractor. He said someone from the HOA had called his office and threatened to file a complaint with the state licensing board if he did any more work in Whispering Pines Landing. The caller said Mike had installed an unpermitted fence and ignored a stop work order, and the HOA was considering legal action. Mike was pissed. He said he had the permit, he had the approval timeline, and he had done nothing wrong. He wanted to know if I had filed a complaint against him. I said no, and I knew exactly who made the call. Mike said if it happened again, he was getting his own attorney. I called David, my attorney. I told him about the call to Mike. David said it was retaliation, it was illegal, and it gave me grounds for an injunction. He said he would send another letter to the board and copy the management company. The letter would demand that Linda cease all contact with me, my contractor, and anyone associated with my property. If she violated it, we would file for a restraining order. David sent the letter that night. Linda did not stop. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at my house. It was not from the HOA, it was from a law firm in Salt Lake. The letter said I was in violation of the covenants for installing a fence that encroached on a utility easement, and the HOA was prepared to file a lien against my property for unpaid fines, legal fees, and administrative costs. The total was listed as $8,400. The breakdown included the original $500 fine, the daily accrual penalties, a $2,000 legal fee, a $3,000 administrative surcharge, and a mystery line item called Covenant Enforcement Recovery. The letter demanded payment within 10 days, or the lien would be filed with the county recorder. I read it twice. I checked the date. I checked the signature. The letter was dated the same day Tom told me the fines were rescinded. The signature was from an attorney named Gerald Finch. I had never heard of him. I called David. He called the law firm. The receptionist said Gerald Finch did not work there. David asked who sent the letter. The receptionist put him on hold, came back, and said the letter was sent in error and should be disregarded. David asked for a retraction in writing. The receptionist said she would pass the message along. The retraction never came. Instead, I got a call from Brenda at the management company. She said Linda had been removed from the board, effective immediately. She said the board had discovered Linda had been issuing notices and fines without board approval, and she had been using her position to harass homeowners. Brenda said the board was reviewing all of Linda's enforcement actions and would be issuing refunds to anyone who had been fined improperly. She said my case was at the top of the list, and I would receive a formal apology and a refund check within 2 weeks. I asked about the lien letter. Brenda said she did not know anything about it. I read her the letter. She went quiet. Then she said, "That is not from us. That is not our attorney. Someone is impersonating the HOA." I said I knew exactly who it was. Brenda said if Linda sent that letter, it was fraud, and I needed to report it to the police. I said I would. I filed a police report the next morning. The officer who took the report was a young guy named Martinez, who said he had dealt with HOA disputes before, but never anything like this. He took copies of the fake lien letter, the doorbell footage, the utility work order, and the timeline. He said he would forward it to the fraud unit and they would investigate. He also said I should contact the Utah Attorney General's office because impersonating an attorney and threatening a lien was a serious offense. I said I would. While the police were investigating, I focused on the sale. The buyer's agent called and said they were still interested, but they needed confirmation that the HOA was stable and there were no pending legal issues. I sent them the board's resolution letter, the refund notice, and a statement from David saying all violations had been cleared. The agent said that was good enough. We set a closing date for 3 weeks out. But Linda was not done. A week before closing, a contractor truck showed up at my house. The driver knocked on my door and said he was there to inspect the fence for code compliance. I asked who sent him. He said the HOA hired him to verify that the fence met county and HOA standards. I asked for a work order. He did not have one. I asked for the name of the person who hired him. He said he did not remember, just that it was a woman from the neighborhood watch. I told him the HOA had already cleared the fence and there was no inspection required. He said he was just doing his job. I said if he touched my fence, I would call the police. He left. I called Brenda. She said the board did not authorize any inspection. I said I knew who sent him. Brenda said she would talk to the board. An hour later, Tom called me. He said Linda had contacted a contractor and told him the board needed an emergency fence inspection because of a liability concern. The contractor did not verify the request. Tom said the board was discussing legal action against Linda, but they needed more evidence. I said I had the contractor's contact information and the doorbell footage of him at my door. Tom said that would help. That night, Rachel called. She said she had been talking to other property managers in the area, and Linda had a reputation. 3 years ago, she was on the board of a different HOA in Heber City. She was removed after a homeowner sued the HOA for harassment and won a settlement. The homeowner had installed a deck without approval, and Linda had issued over 20 notices, threatened a lien, and hired a contractor to remove the deck while the homeowner was on vacation. The homeowner came home to a pile of lumber in their yard and a bill for $5,000. They sued. The HOA settled for $30,000, and Linda was forced to resign. Rachel said the case was sealed, but the property manager she talked to remembered it because it was one of the worst HOA abuse cases she had ever seen. I asked Rachel why Whispering Pines Landing hired Linda if she had that history. Rachel said HOAs do not do background checks on board members. Anyone can run, anyone can win, and once they are on the board, they have a lot of power and very little oversight. She said the only way to stop someone like Linda is to document everything, build a case, and force the board to act. I said that is exactly what I was doing. The final confrontation happened 3 days before closing. I got a text from Greg, my neighbor, saying Linda was in the neighborhood taking photos of my fence. I looked out the window and saw her standing on the sidewalk with her phone, snapping pictures from every angle. I grabbed my phone and walked outside. She saw me coming and did not move. She just kept taking photos. I said, "Linda, what are you doing?" She said, "Documenting ongoing violations." I said, "There are no violations. The board cleared the fence." She said the board does not have the authority to override county code. I said, "The county issued the permit. The fence is compliant." She said, "We will see about that." Then she turned and walked toward her car. I followed her. I said, "Linda, you need to stop. You have been removed from the board. You do not have any enforcement authority. You are harassing me, and if you do not stop, I will file for a restraining order." She stopped walking. She turned around. Her face was red, her jaw tight. She said, "You think you are so smart. You think you can come into this neighborhood and ignore the rules and get away with it. You should have read the rules before you moved in, sweetheart. The rules do not care about your excuses, and neither do I." That was the moment I had been waiting for. I pulled out my phone and opened the video I had been holding back. It was not the doorbell footage of her moving the stake. It was not the fake lien letter. It was a clip from my doorbell camera taken 2 weeks earlier, the night before she issued the first fine. In the clip, Linda is standing on my porch, looking through the window, trying the door handle. She does not knock. She does not ring the bell. She is checking to see if I am home. Then she walks around the side of the house toward the fence line. The timestamp is 11:47 at night. The clip is 2 minutes long. It shows her trespassing, snooping, and casing my property. I held the phone out so she could see the screen. I said, "Linda, this is the clip I am going to show the board tomorrow night, and if you do not leave me alone, I am going to show it to the police, the county attorney, and every homeowner in this neighborhood, because this is not about the fence. This is about you abusing your position to harass people you do not like, and I have the receipts." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then she said, "That does not prove anything." I said, "It proves you were trespassing. It proves you were targeting me before you had any evidence of a violation. And combined with everything else, the fake lien letter, the utility work order, the moved stake, it proves you have been running a personal vendetta disguised as enforcement. The board is going to see this tomorrow, and when they do, you are done." She did not say anything. She just turned and walked to her car. But as she opened the door, a gust of wind came through, sharp and cold, and the packet of printed papers she was holding, the ones with the photos and the notes and the laminated fence guideline sheet, went airborne. Pages scattered across the street, tumbling end over end. Linda lunged for them, but the wind carried them into a drainage ditch. She stood there for a moment, staring at the mess, her pink sun hat flapping in the wind. Then she got in her car and drove away. The emergency board meeting was the next night. I had asked for it through David, and the board agreed. Tom said they wanted to resolve the issue before it became a legal problem. I showed up at the clubhouse at 6:30 with my file, my phone, and Rachel as a witness. The board was already there: Tom, Karen, Paul, and 2 other members I had not met before. Brenda was there too, taking notes. Linda was not invited. Tom opened the meeting by saying they had reviewed my complaint and the supporting documentation, and they wanted to give me a chance to present my case. I said I appreciated that, but I needed the meeting to be recorded, and I needed a vote on the record. Tom said that was fine. Brenda started the recording. I walked through the timeline. I showed them the survey, the permit, the covenant language, the photos of other fences, the records request response, and the fake lien letter. Then I played the doorbell footage. First the clip of Linda moving the stake. Then the clip of her trespassing on my property at night. The room was silent. Paul, the secretary, was shaking his head. Karen, the treasurer, was taking notes. Tom was staring at the screen. When the clips ended, I said, Linda Johnson has used her position to harass me, fabricate evidence, and interfere with my property rights. She has lied to contractors, impersonated attorneys, and trespassed on my property. She has violated the covenants, state law, and basic ethical standards. I am asking the board to remove her from all HOA duties, issue a formal apology, and refund any fines she has issued to other homeowners. I am also asking the board to adopt a new enforcement process that includes oversight, verification, and accountability. Because if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Tom asked the other board members if they had questions. Karen said, "Do we know how many other homeowners Linda has targeted?" Brenda checked her laptop and said, "Based on the records, Linda has issued 63 notices in the last 2 years. 41 of them resulted in fines. None of them went to a hearing." Karen said, "That is a problem." Paul said, "That is a lawsuit waiting to happen." Tom said, "I move that we adopt an enforcement checklist that requires board approval for any notice or fine, and that we remove Linda Johnson from all HOA responsibilities effective immediately." Karen seconded. The vote was unanimous. Then Tom said, "I also move that we refund all fines issued by Linda Johnson in the last 2 years, and send a letter to every affected homeowner explaining the situation and apologizing for the error." Paul seconded. The vote was unanimous again. Brenda said she would prepare the letters and the refund checks by the end of the week. Tom said he would contact the HOA attorney to discuss whether the board should pursue legal action against Linda. He also said he would work with Brenda to develop the new enforcement checklist and present it at the next regular meeting. Then he looked at me and said, "I am sorry this happened. The board failed to provide oversight, and you paid the price. We will do better." I said I appreciated that, but I needed one more thing. I needed the board to issue a statement to my buyer confirming that there were no open violations, no pending fines, and no legal disputes related to my property. Tom said Brenda would draft it and send it to my attorney by the end of the day. I said thank you. The meeting was over. The next morning, I got an email from Brenda with the statement attached. I forwarded it to David and the buyer's agent. The agent called an hour later and said the buyer was satisfied and we were clear to close. I said that was great news. She said congratulations and hung up. That afternoon, Greg came by with another 6-pack. He said the neighborhood group chat was blowing up. Someone had posted about the board meeting, and within an hour, a dozen homeowners had come forward saying Linda had fined them for minor violations and threatened liens if they did not pay. One couple said they paid $3,000 to avoid a lien over a mailbox that was 6 inches too far from the curb. Another homeowner said Linda had issued a stop work order on a patio project and charged them $500 to re-inspect it after they fixed a non-existent code issue. Greg said the board was going to be issuing a lot of refund checks. I asked Greg if anyone had heard from Linda. He said no. Someone drove by her house earlier and saw a for sale sign in the yard. Greg said rumor was she was moving out of state. I said good riddance. Greg raised his beer and said, "To getting rid of tyrants." I clinked my bottle against his and said 2 HOAs that finally do their job. The closing happened on schedule. I signed the papers, handed over the keys, and walked out of the title company office with a check and a sense of relief I had not felt in months. The buyer seemed happy. Their agent seemed happy. I was happy. I had a new job, a new city, and a story I would be telling for years. But the story was not quite over. 2 weeks after I moved to Denver, I got a call from Tom, the board president. He said the board had finished the review of Linda's enforcement actions. Out of 63 notices, 49 were based on incorrect measurements, fabricated evidence, or selective enforcement. The board issued refunds totaling $92,000. Tom said the HOA's insurance carrier had sent a risk warning that made the board panic, and they were now requiring all enforcement actions to go through a third-party inspection company before any fines could be issued. He said the new process was slower but fairer, and it was a direct result of my complaint. He thanked me for holding the board accountable. I said I was glad it worked out. Tom also said Linda had filed a defamation suit against the board, claiming they had damaged her reputation by removing her and issuing the refunds. The board's attorney filed a motion to dismiss based on the evidence I had provided, and the judge granted it. Linda's suit was thrown out. Tom said she was now facing a countersuit from 3 homeowners who were seeking damages for harassment and emotional distress. He said it was going to be a long legal fight, but the board was confident they would win. I asked Tom what happened to the fence enforcement in general. He said the board had voted to grandfather in all existing fences and only enforce height and setback rules on new construction. He also said they had updated the covenant language to require surveys and permits before any enforcement action could be taken. It was not perfect, but it was better. Tom said he hoped I was settling in well in Denver, and if I ever wanted to come back to Park City for a ski weekend, I should let him know. I said I would think about it, but honestly, I was good. The fallout continued for months. Rachel called me in April and said the Utah Attorney General's office had opened an investigation into Linda for fraud and impersonation. The fake lien letter was the smoking gun. Linda claimed she had hired a freelance paralegal to draft the letter and did not know it was fraudulent, but the paralegal did not exist. The phone number on the letterhead went to a burner phone registered in Linda's name. Rachel said the AG's office was building a case, and it was possible Linda would face criminal charges. In June, I got a check in the mail from the Whispering Pines Landing Association. It was a refund of the fines I had paid during the dispute, plus interest, plus a reimbursement for my attorney fees. The total was $4,200. The memo line said, "Resolution of enforcement error." I deposited the check and bought Rachel dinner the next time I was in Salt Lake. In August, Greg sent me a text saying Linda had moved to Arizona. He said her house sold for under market value, and she left without saying goodbye to anyone. The neighborhood group chat had a thread going about her for weeks, with people sharing stories of fines, threats, and shady enforcement. One person posted a photo of a laminated fence guideline sheet they found in the clubhouse trash. Greg said it was like exorcising a ghost. In October, the board sent a newsletter to all homeowners announcing the new enforcement process. The newsletter included an apology, a summary of the refunds, and an explanation of the changes. It also included a section titled Lessons Learned, which outlined how the board had failed to provide oversight and how they were committed to doing better. The newsletter was professional, transparent, and honest. I forwarded it to David and said, "This is what accountability looks like." In December, Rachel sent me a link to a court filing. 3 homeowners had settled their lawsuit against Linda for an undisclosed amount. The settlement included a clause prohibiting Linda from serving on any HOA board in Utah for 10 years. Rachel said it was a small victory, but it set a precedent. She said more HOAs were starting to take enforcement oversight seriously because they did not want to end up like Whispering Pines Landing. Looking back, the whole thing feels surreal. I moved to Park City for a job and ended up in a 6-month legal battle with an HOA enforcer who targeted the wrong fence, fabricated evidence, and tried to cover it up with fake liens and contractor intimidation. I spent thousands of dollars on legal fees, hundreds of hours documenting everything, and weeks of stress wondering if I would be able to sell my house. But I won. The board adopted an enforcement checklist that limits Karen tactics. Linda's credibility collapsed in front of witnesses. And I got out with my dignity intact and a check for my trouble. The lesson I learned is simple. Document everything. HOAs have power, but they are not above the law. If you know the rules, if you keep records, and if you are willing to fight, you can hold them accountable. It is not easy, it is not fast, but it is possible, and when you win, it feels good. I am settled in Denver now. The new job is great. The mountains are still a bonus, and I am renting. because I am done with HOAs for a while, maybe forever. But if I ever buy again, I am going to read the covenants, check the board meeting minutes, and ask the neighbors if there is anyone like Linda on the board. Because once you have been through it, you know what to look for, and you know how to fight back. The fence is still standing in Park City. The new owners sent me a photo last month. It looks good. The gate swings smooth, the posts are solid, and the height is exactly 6 feet from grade. They said the HOA has not bothered them once. They said the neighborhood is quiet, the rules are fair, and the board is responsive. They said they love it. I am happy for them, and I am glad I fought. Because that fence is not just wood and nails. It is proof that you can stand up to bullies, even when they have titles and clipboards and laminated sheets. You just have to know the rules better than they do, and you have to be willing to use them. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.